So welcome to the Java tutorial. Let's create a sample Spring Boot application with two of the REST APIs like get and post. So first step is, let's go to the Spring initializer. Let's try to add the dependencies over here and generate a Maven project over here. So select Maven, language Java, and group ID. You can mention any of this thing with this. Use a stable Spring Boot version instead of the snapshot versions. And let's select practice, or let's say sample. So you can give a name, description, and a package name would be the combination of all these things. And we want to package it as a jar, and with the Java version as 17. Now because we are trying to create a Spring Boot REST API, let's add a web dependency. And if at all we want to connect to the repository layer database, let's add the Spring Data JPA. You can add a H2DB as well, and if needed you can add Lombok as well. So let's generate this. Now let's try to open up this one with IntelliJ. First, let's try to build this up with Maven clean install. Now we can see the build is success. Let's get started. So we want to create it in the form of like a 3-layer structure or a 3-tier structure, which we generally say in the Spring Boot. So the 3 layers are like controller, service, and DAO. So let's create 3 packages for them. So now the purpose of these 3 layers is, so controller layer, it acts as a gatekeeper. So whenever any new requests come in, so it always hits the controller layer first, and from there it gets segregated over to the service layer. So any business logic and all we generally do write in the service layer, and later, so if at all we are connected to any database, or if we want to perform any CRUD operations or something, we will have a repository layer as well. So the process is like from the REST API client, like for example the Postman, we try to send a request payload, it comes and hits the Spring Boot API, Spring Boot app at the controller layer, and from there it goes to the service and then to the repository, and it checks the database, and then from there it returns back via repository, service, controller, and finally it sends the response payload to the Postman. So before that, let's create a model package as well. In Spring Boot or in Java, everything we talk it as an object, so we only consider as objects. So in the database we have tables and records, So let's say we query any record from the database, so we can't directly communicate it in the similar format, so everything needs to be converted to a Java object. So that's why we have this model layer, so wherein we are converting the database tables into the Java objects, so that the Spring Boot can understand it and try to process it. So let's create a simple employee class. So the Copilot worked for us and it's giving the prompt. So let's go with this. So we just want a simple employee pozo, like with ID, name and role. Let's also create to string. Now let's go to the controller package and create a employee controller class, and let's annotate with the REST controller so that it can act upon the request. And let's give a request mapping, and let's say API D1. So we are making use of the request mapping so that in order to handle the requests that are mapped to this URI. So we can create 4 REST API methods. Let's say get, post, put and delete majorly. In this video, let's go ahead and with the get and post REST endpoints. So let's say I wanna return, okay, let me return employee as, so get employee, we can just go with the prompt. So let's say, and don't forget to annotate with the get mapping annotation and give it as employee. So whenever we get a request over here, so it just returns a new employee. Similarly, yeah, let's go with the prompt. And we can give the URI as same thing. So in the post mapping, so we are trying to take some request payload and we are trying to create that employee within the database, or just save over here, or just move it to the service layer. So for that we need a request body annotation, so that whatever the request body we get from the request, we can save it over to this variable and we can pass that variable. For now, let's say employee created, let's change it to the string. Now let's run our application. So we see that the Spring Boot application started, and at a Tomcat at port 8080. Let's go to the Postman. HTTP localhost 8080, and what is the request mapping that we gave over here? API v1. API v1, and at the get mapping we gave employee. So we are trying to reach this endpoint or this method so that it should return an employee object. Let's see. Yes. So here we can see that it returned an employee object with ID 1, name John Doe, and role developer. So hence we can say that the get mapping is working fine. Now let's go to the post mapping. Here we can also do one thing. So here we have created a service package as well. So we want to navigate between different layers and know how each layer communicates with the other. So let's create employee service class, annotate it with service. So we are doing all this annotation so that when the Spring Boot app boots up, it looks into all these things and it creates beans of them. So it's nothing but it's another word for component annotation, and Spring Boot internally has a component scan. So which scans different components at the boot up. Okay, so let's go to the service. Okay, we created the service class. Now let's go back to the controller. Now let's say I'll just comment it out and I'll just say return. Firstly, I need to add the dependency of employee service over here. So I'm auto wiring that. Basically we are just adding the dependency of that class over here so that we can make use of those methods in this class. And employee service dot, let's say get emp employee, and I know that we don't have this method, so let's create this one. Okay, return new employee. Yes, just hit the tab. So instead of returning from there, we are trying to come over here and return from here. Similarly, let's delete this one and employee service dot create employee. So let's create this method as well. So now just go ahead with the prompt. So here let's delete this one. So here what we are doing, so we are just whatever the employee object, so whatever the request payload that we are getting, we are trying to save it to this employee object, and we are trying to pass this as an argument, and we created this method in the employee service. Let's go inside this one. So this employee, here we're trying to return it over here, and we're using a toString in order to display the content. This is what it will get written over there. Let's try now. So we see the same result, but the only difference is previously we were getting the response from the controller layer itself, but now whenever we hit this get employee REST API, so it comes over here and then it navigates to the service layer, it comes over here and then from here it's returning the new employee. So now let's go try the post endpoint. Let's say post, and we need to give a JSON. Let's just copy paste this one, paste it over here. Let's say and D. Okay, now let's hit it. So we can see it's returning employee created with ID, name and role. So now what we're doing here, the request comes over here. So whatever the JSON request payload that we are giving, it gets saved to this employee object, and then that we are passing it as an argument to this method. It goes inside, comes to the service layer, comes to this method, and then so we are just returning this string with the employee object. That's what gets written in the Postman. So in this video we have tried both these endpoints. So we have tried two REST API methods. One is get mapping and the other one is post mapping. Hope you enjoyed this video. That's it for this video. Thanks a lot, guys.